Good afternoon. It is such a privilege to be here, and thank you, Richard, and all of the inspiring speakers today. So I'm just going to begin. As a child, I was painfully shy, awkward, gawky, and my parents thought that by putting me in front of the camera and dressing me up in a lion costume, it might somehow give me courage. Well, it turns out I never got my courage from being in front of the camera. I got my courage from being behind the camera. And something amazing happened. Thank you. When I had a camera in my hand, all of a sudden I felt empowered to go out and engage with the world. And it was like this passport. But then, a bigger surprise was that not only did it empower me, it empowered the people I was photographing by giving them a voice. And I built up the courage one day in my early 20s to pursue my dream to be a foreign correspondent. And I got a job at a small business paper in the Czech Republic. And about a year into that job, I heard about this conflict brewing in our backyard. The war in Kosovo was beginning. And I couldn't get these stories out of my head of children climbing over the mountains in their ballet slippers to flee this conflict. I knew I had to go. And so overnight, I went from this relatively amateur photographer taking pictures of businessmen and politicians to a war photographer without really meaning to. And like a lot of young journalists, I wanted to tell powerful stories. I wanted to make a difference. And so I went to all of the worst conflicts unfolding at the time, from Kashmir to Angola to Afghanistan, so many places, Sierra Leone, places you probably have never heard of, like Casamance in West Africa. And I think that we're automatically taught to believe that the most powerful stories are those that are driven in angst and death and suffering. And I don't ever want to minimize the importance of telling these stories, but I had set down this path without really intending to. One of the first places I was sent to was Gaza during the Second Intifada. And what began as children throwing rocks quickly escalated into people dying. And if you look at the upper right hand of this picture, you'll see this building is actually being blown up. And I would have been inside that building. I was running towards it. And as that happened, my battery fell out of my camera. And in that moment, when I stopped to pick it up, a helicopter came, shot a missile, and it just vaporized in front of my eyes. But I was asked to get close to the action, and that's what I did. You know, I thought that's what my editors wanted, that's what my colleagues were doing, and I also thought that's what the audience wanted. You know, to bring back the most violent, dramatic images. But I had this profound turning point during this, because on this one square block, there were a dozen of us photographing the same scene as it unfolded. And I had to ask myself, were we unconsciously only telling one half of the story, which was incomplete at best, and maybe dishonest at worst? Because there were plenty of other stories all around us. This was also in Gaza, and I was walking back to my hotel one day, and I heard this music coming out of a building, so I wandered in. And I saw this beautiful Palestinian couple getting married. This expression of love in the midst of all of this conflict and chaos captivated me. Because these are the stories that allowed me to relate to them as human beings. I thought, why aren't we telling these stories too? Have we become so attuned to thinking that the stories that give us joy, that help us relate to one another are banal. They're not worth telling. And I just have to ask the question, what would the world be like if we chose to illuminate the things that unite us and not simply all the things that divide us? So this was one of the first places I began in my career. It's a tiny country in West Africa called Guinea-Bissau. It's one of the most impoverished countries on the planet, was then, and it still is today. And I went and I discovered something that surprised me, because I had only read about, frankly, the continent of Africa in one of two ways. It's always defined either as war, famine, plagues, or the other extreme, you can go on a safari and see these exotic animals. But what I found touched me. It was something far different from both of those narratives and far more complex. And I spent my days gathering firewood, learning Pular, the language, walking miles just to get water and carrying it back on my head. And I learned really just how the majority of people on the planet really live. I thought I was going to stay just for a few weeks. Those weeks turned into months, and those months turned into half a year. And, you know, to the women, I was a mystery. I was completely useless in my early 20s. I didn't have a husband, no children. And how could I have survived for so long without even knowing how to get water out of the well? And I brought several sacks of rice with me, and I stayed through the end of the dry season, and that's all we had to eat. Every day, we'd share one bowl of rice, and I really understood what hunger feels like. But all of these incredible stories began to emerge after the people opened up, and you know, it was interesting that just in the daily rituals, it revealed so much. So, for example, every morning, the women would ask a whole series of questions like, how did you sleep? How's your body? How are your children? And then they would always ask, did you all wake up one by one or all together? And it meant if you all woke up together, something terrible must have happened in the night. And if you woke up one by one, you know, you woke up to the gentle rhythms. And so, you know, my life there obviously was different from the lives we all lead here. But that's the obvious thing. The thing that really surprised me was how much we had in common, how much we shared. And on my last night in this village of Dembeljampura, this is Alio, my best buddy who loved my soap. But he was asking me a million questions about my return home. Amy, do you have cashew trees in America? Do you have mangoes? And then we're sitting under the sea of stars, and he looks up at this big, beautiful full moon and asks me if we have a moon in America. Now I'm going to turn to a story I've been working on since 2009. I got a call from my friends in the Czech Republic, and they said, you know, there's these 4 northern white rhinos who are being flown from a zoo in the Czech Republic all the way to Africa. And when I heard that, it almost sounded like a cartoon, you know, animals returning to Africa. But actually, it was this last-ditch effort to save an entire species. There were only 8 of them left on the planet at the time, all in zoos. Today, there's only 3 of them left. And so on one snowy night, they were brought from Prague all the way to Kenya. And this is what it looks like to roam free on the dusty plains of Africa. But the truth is, this is actually what it looks like. They have to be guarded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because their horns are so valuable because of poaching. It's worth more than gold right now. And I hate showing, I'm sorry, I know this picture is really difficult to look at. I struggled with even putting it in. But the truth is, this is what extinction looks like. And we're witnessing it today. In our lifetime, we are going to see We've already seen several species of rhinos go extinct, elephants, and a whole host of lesser species also, if we don't do something now. But as I was telling this story, I had to ask the question, what do the people living next to these animals think? How do they feel about it? And it turns out this is Yusuf. He's feeding 3 orphaned black rhinos in Kenya. And Yusuf holds the key to saving these species because it's the local communities that can actually save them. They hold this key. And these are Samburu warriors seeing a rhino for the first time in their lives. Because they're so endangered, most of them have never even touched one or seen them. These guys, I think the incredible thing, the thing that might surprise you, in these little pockets in northern Kenya, I found these communities that are protecting these animals. And guess what? The numbers are increasing. And, the other amazing thing is that not one rhino has been poached in these conservancies in the last 2 years. And I think these are the images that give us hope and motivate action. And this is Kamara and Khalifi, precious. And then I just want to end this story. This is not just a story about wildlife. This is a story about us. This is our home. This is our future. And China has recently made this commitment to ban the ivory sails. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, people are so excited, and this is really going to make a difference to the animals, to Kenyans, and to frankly to all of us. So that's incredibly exciting. But now I'm going to focus on my favorite story here. So we're used to hearing just really horrific, bad environmental news out of China. I've got a story that's going to surprise you. You would not expect to see anything possibly good related to wildlife or the environment here, right? Well, something incredible is happening. Not only are they releasing captive-born pandas back into the wild, you've got the biggest reforestation program going on the planet right now. China's investing billions of dollars into creating more habitat and corridors for all of these animals to exist. And, yes. China is one of the only countries on the planet right now where forest coverage is actually growing. And, this is spectacular. So I had front row access. I was part of a team who was there when this panda named Finding Hope took her first steps out into the wild. And here I am. I wanted to be empathetic to her because it must have been terrifying leaving home forever. And the director of the panda program, Director Shanghai May, also fondly known as Papa Panda, saw me, and he came up, gave me a hug, and said, "You will get to hold 2 baby pandas." President Obama, he only held 1. So I got not just 2, I got a whole bumper crop of baby pandas. Yeah, this is him, Papa Panda, with this year's batch of pandas. Okay, and then this is Yay Yay. You'd be so surprised because it turns out pandas are the most elusive creature. They weren't even discovered until the last century, and the first one was only captured in 1927. If you look at ancient art, you will see all kinds of animals, ancient Chinese art, but you'll never see a picture of a panda. And then, in the beginning, in this captive breeding program, they thought that pandas were this very elusive. That they had a problem breeding them, and They did all kinds of crazy things like giving them Viagra and showing them panda porn. But it turns out that pandas only have 24 to 72 hours to breed a year. They can only get pregnant in that time. And so once they figured these things out, they've got a very successful program. This is what a baby panda looks like when it's born. They weigh 1/900th the size of their parent. And then they're one of the fastest growing animals on the planet. They smell like wet puppies, if you wanted to know. And I'm out of time, so I'm going to scroll through. But the biggest, most amazing part of the story is when they rewild them, they don't want them ever to get used to human beings. So we all had to wear these panda costumes scented with panda urine. And it turns out that you have to actually train a panda to go back into the wild, and they have to pass a series of tests like running away from predators. And who's the captive, right? But okay, I'm just going to end here. And, I don't let my parents dress me up in panda costumes anymore, but I do occasionally find myself getting dressed up. And I started photography as a way to escape my shyness, ended up as a war photographer. It wasn't fulfilling to me, so I walked away. And I think that's the important lesson, let life lead you where it may, but, stop and question, too. And then I finally just want to end with one message, which is remember to see the whole story. Read through the headlines, because, yes, we do need to talk about the challenges of the world, but, if we only tell it in a negative, divisive way, we're on a fast race to the bottom. And, the world is this beautiful place, and we need to celebrate the goodness. It's everywhere. Thank you.